There were 3 or 4 questions that emerged in the breakout groups that I want to put to the panel. And I think one of the places to start is immediately with Pierluigi's last point. And I'd like to put this question to Taco, which is there a role for data that's not fully open in the decade? And how are we going to handle that? Taco?
I had trouble finding the unmute button. Yes, well, not fully open. That means in most cases that they are open under certain conditions. So if we need those conditions, of course, the goal is to have all open data. But the reality, as Pierluigi just explained, is that it is in some cases just not possible. But we know from previous experience that it is possible to use even the not open data to build certain products. So it depends, of course, on the conditions, but yes, we should strive to also include the data which are non-open yet, because they may be used under certain, as I said, under certain conditions in products, etc. So they are very valuable.
Okay. Good. Just wanted to make that clear. And Vladimir, we have quite a few people from industry which have their own unique challenges. Can you just say a couple of things about what your vision is for how industry data can help the decade?
Linwood, Vladimir is not online anymore.
Okay, would you like to take it, Peter? Or maybe Allison. Allison, would you like to take that question? What do we envision for the contribution of industry, particularly to data in the decade?
Yeah, thanks, Linwood. Look, I think it's an essential question. Industry is a crucial player in all of this, and in fact, we had some industry representatives in the breakout group that I was moderating. I think there are different ways that industry can be involved, and one of the most evident ways that comes to mind is through sharing of data. But we heard in the breakout groups that there are barriers to that, and I think Pierluigi's presentation was very good on that as well in diving into some of the reasons why there are barriers to that. And so that's one thing I think the decade also needs to do, is really try and analyze those. And I know we're working with UN Global Compact and other industry partners to look at some of those issues. But we also really need industry to be involved in the co-design, the co-development and the co-delivery processes throughout the ocean decade to make sure we're getting the data initiatives and actions right from the outset. So not only if they're going to be sharing data or using data or helping to promote data management, industry needs to be involved with the other actors in the decade from the outset in the co-design and co-delivery of those initiatives. So there are multiple entry points, and it's something that I hope actually comes out of this discussion this evening is looking at next steps, how we can specifically work with those industry stakeholders moving forward and get to some very concrete and tangible entry points.
Thanks, Alison. And I think Pierluigi, you had something you wanted to add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the industry point, we just had an ocean best practices consultative workshop, and we had a data and information track. And during that, we had a few partners from industry who sort of said, we actually have enterprise solutions that can deal with a lot of the problems and challenges you're dealing with, and they're not secret by any means. It just never occurred to us that it could be worth sharing in the more research or innovation spaces. So I think, just meeting each other and saying, oh, here are the problems, could catalyze a lot of exchange of things that aren't so protected, shall we say, while we figure out what to do with the things that are. On that other point, so I work a bit with biomedical fields and ontologies and biomedicine, and there, of course, a lot of data cannot be shared because of privacy protection for patients. But there are companies that work encrypted all. You can send code to it to work on it in an anonymized fashion, and you get results back that are also anonymized. So you don't have to release the raw data, but you can allow it to be used for certain purposes. And I think if we can find those middle grounds, we can make great progress in ocean data science.
Terrific. Thanks, Pierluigi. And there was quite a lot of discussion about whether we should limit ourselves to certain kinds of data. And then Frank has just responded to Taco saying we certainly don't want to restrict ourselves just to open data. Other people responded to Frank's comment that we don't want to restrict ourselves just to EOV data either. But then I think particularly in Lucy's breakout, it became clear that we're doing this because people need data. And I just wonder, perhaps this is another question for Alison or Lucy, how are we going to engage people through the decade to find out what data they need rather than providing them with the data we want to give them? Maybe you'd like to take that, Lucy, from the Ocean Info Hub perspective.
Thanks, Linwood. That is a very good question. How to engage end users from the very beginning of the process and find out what data products or data sets are going to be useful. I would say that the ODIS catalog of sources could be one of the tools to do this, and then probably the stakeholder participation process of the decade. So maybe Alison would like to say something about that.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. So I alluded to this in my presentation, but the decade will be developing a global stakeholder forum, which is going to be sort of the main interface both between stakeholder groups and the decade coordination structures, but also amongst stakeholder groups themselves. So we, again, not looking for a prescriptive for a top-down process, but looking to let a sort of a organic stakeholder ecosystem emerge throughout the decade, which will have a variety of different groups, whether they be thematically based or geographically based, different stakeholder groups that are coming up. And the role of the decade coordination unit through this global stakeholder forum will really be to curate and manage communities of practice around different issues. And these communities of practice will be managed in such a way that they're responding to that co-design and that co-delivery challenge. So as different initiatives are coming up and people are coming up with ideas and actions that they want to put forward, the role of these communities of practice and through the facilitation of these communities of practice will really be to try and make the links and the exchanges through that global stakeholder forum. So at this point, the infrastructure isn't there yet, but it will be progressively rolled out over the next 6 to 8 months. But we really see that as one of the fundamental functions of the decade coordination unit, is playing this very active role in facilitating this co-design process through the communities of practice that will be developed and emerge.
And will that happen at the kind of regional level at which we're building these OHIs?
There will definitely be a very strong regional element to the global stakeholder forum. It'll be thematic, but it will also be geographic, and we're already seeing a very strong emergence of regional platforms or task forces or groups. So we envisage, that a lot of that action will be happening at the regional level, and they're therefore able to interact with the regional nodes under the OIH initiative as well.
Okay, terrific. And I think Lucy had a follow-on comment.
Thank you. In fact, Alison has pretty much covered it to say that through the Ocean Info Hub project, the 3 regional groups will be developing pilot proof of concepts within those regions, and end users will be part of that co-design process. So that's another link in specifically with regards to the co-design of the ODIS architecture and developing products for end users. Thank you.
Terrific. And if you also want to paste questions into the chat, I'm happy to ask questions that way too, if you don't want to speak before everybody. Hernan, you mentioned that everyone was welcome to join the IWG SOTUS. What does it mean to be a member of the IWG SOTUS? You're muted, Hernan.
What it means is that you are becoming part of the group that gets to develop the strategy and data management for the UN decade that we need. And so I would like to have everybody to be part of it and build together the data strategy that we need. What this means is our next step is to develop the data management plan. We have developed a set of guidelines for the data policy, but we need the data management part, which is the, really the important part that we need to develop.
Thanks, Aaron. Since I don't see any more hands up, let's see if we have here something from Frank. Frank's just saying it's good to achieve modest or sustainable goals so that we can see what success looks like in the decade. I think that's true. And Emily has a question here. I think it's more of a comment. It's a very good comment, which is end users don't often know what data they need or want. And have we thought about at the ODIS level or at the decade level, how we're going to bridge that gap between users who have problems with data that may not be in a form that can solve those problems? Alison? Yeah.
Yep. But I'll start and then and then hand over to you, Pierluigi. But just also to perhaps mention through the Global Stakeholder Forum, there will also be a series of regional, international conferences, webinars, meetings that are arranged where we're going to be bringing these groups together and actually having sessions that are dedicated to putting people in the room together so that they can start answering those questions. I've got this problem, but I don't know what data I need. I don't know what I need to be generated. So it's going to be a very hands-on approach to trying to tease out some of those issues. So there are mechanisms planned for that as well that will be rolled out in coming years. It's obviously a challenge, though. I mean, we're very aware of the challenge, but as we get more and more experience, and as the community gets more and more experience in doing this, hopefully others will become advocates for that approach, and we'll be able to take that experience and duplicate and amplify.
Pierluigi.
On a more technical level, also this is why in the Decade Implementation Plan too, there's a bit of an emphasis on digital knowledge representation too. So through the use of ontologies and knowledge representation, the metadata that's inside the records can be used by machine agents to automatically suggest related data if we build out that layer well. And that's already in progress. It's not something that's science fiction. Many of us use that sort of technology. So I think that's also part of it, that it's not just about finding data, but it's also about discovering data, where there's a space to generate a new kind of suggestion, sort of like, and look at this, similar to kind of the way it's done now with simple usage data, but a little bit more crafted towards the phenomena themselves. So I think there's a lot of tech development to happen in that direction to solve exactly that problem, to help people know to ask questions that never occurred to them before through the assistance of digital knowledge representation.
And Hiroko brings up the point that many of these questions were also brought up during the Global Compact. I wonder if someone can say something about how we will work with the Global Compact to make sure that we're doing knowledge sharing across the UN bodies. Is that something you can tackle, Peter? No?
No, more Julian or Alison for that.
Okay,
one.
Julian.
I can try to comment on that, Linwood. Yes, I mean, we've now established a very good collaboration with the Global Compact. We developed a joint brief for the private sector, which was released in June, and the idea is really to encourage the private sector to engage in the work of a decade, both as kind of end users in trying to help us develop and understand what kind of services we would like to support, but also in terms of contribution. As been said before, there's a lot of data which is sitting within those companies, and there seems to be a genuine willingness to share and really add value to those data for the common good. So we will work with the Compact as a sprint report, which is focused and which will be developed in the coming weeks with the Compact, in order to flesh out a little bit better what kind of actions and activities that the private sector can engage with.
Terrific. Well, there are a couple of more comments, but not questions. And so I think with that, we can turn it back over to close. I think that we'll hear some next steps from Taco, and then we'll move on to Sergey and Taco.
I just wanted to mention the chat comments. We will include the substantial ones in the report, because there were some useful ones from Janet now, and from Pierre. So we'll also take that into account in the report. And yes, then on to Taco. Taco, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I considered using the famous Lord Kitchener's or Uncle Sam poster with the "I want you" text as a start of this part, but I decided against it. But we do want you, we do need you. We need your and your organization's input, your help, your expertise, your data, and your resources to jointly, and I can't emphasize that enough, to jointly build a digital ocean ecosystem for the decade. And we hope we have given a good overview of the decade and the task at hand to ensure the data are readily available to meet the objectives of the decade. We hope also that we have made you enthusiastic to participate. So what are our next steps? Well, first, we'll ask you all participants kindly requested to discuss with their organizations, their parent organizations, how to participate and contribute to the UN Decade of Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development. Now you provided, Pierluigi also already showed this in his presentation, and you provide us all with information on your organizations and the data that you hold. And that's very valuable information on those data and data systems. And we would like to use that and provide a condensed overview in our report. But also, we would like to enter records in the ODISCAT system. And Arno already showed that for a beer, he is prepared to do a lot. So we'll follow up on that with emails in a couple of days, provide you a link, and then you can decide an explanation how to enter the information. If you don't have time, then you can provide an Excel or so, and Arno can do this for you together with Christian. Then invitation for you all, and it has been said several times already, both in the chat as well during the presentations, to join and participate, especially in the SODIS group on the strategy for data and information stewardship. And again, you already got the email or the address from Hernan as the chair of this group, but we will also follow up with an email in a couple of days as a kind reminder. Then, for the more technical aspects of it, as part of the Ocean Info Hub to develop this data and information system architecture, we invite you to nominate domain experts on semantic interoperability within your organization to join the technical working group within the Ocean Info Hub project. Another thing is that we welcome ideas and suggestions and proposals for decade actions. And I now want to give the floor to Julian to explain a little bit more about the procedures for defining and proposing decade actions. Julian, please.
Thanks, Taco. So Alison already kind of touched upon this in her presentation, but I just wanted to maybe add a few elements to this call for action, which is really the main mechanism for starting the action under the decade. And I hope you've been convinced that the decade, I think, offers quite a unique convening framework for jointing, for working, in a collaborative way, for developing co-design and collaborative actions across multiple group of stakeholders. As been presented, we have 10 ocean challenges, which are the kind of the target goals that we have for the decade at this present time. Of course, this might evolve in time, and each of those dimensions, all of those big initiatives have a very strong data and information management component to it. So I think it's important that as a community, we try to address those and really understand what are the new underpinning a paradigm that needs to support the implementation of those challenges. In addition, we also have many kind of underpinning issues when we talk about data and information management in the context of a decade. There's the issue of capacity development, which of course is also another kind of cross-cutting objective of this decade, with the issue of integration, in the issue of interoperability, the issue of accessibility, and how we are going to use emerging and new innovative technologies to really leverage and deliver data and knowledge ultimately to end users. So we hope that this provides sufficient incentive to the community to start thinking about the actions, because this is really what we are going into now. We've just finished a 3-year preparatory process. The decade is now under review by the GA, but we want to signal to the community that we are basically opening up for business. And to do that is we are issuing this first call for action, which will be open for 3 months, starting from the 15th of October. And of course, again, here it's not business as usual. We are really interested in new ideas, new approaches to the topics that are within the decade. There are a number of criteria that some of those initiatives need to meet, and that's quite normal if we want to achieve these elements of transformation. We have, for example, as criteria, this element of co-design that we want to be really embedded in each of the actions of a decade. We have this context, this element of data, availability of data in open access and shared in discoverable manner. So this is something that is really needs to be a principle for all of the decade actions. And of course, we expect that some of those actions that are going to come are already kind of maybe already funded. They are already in place. If they can demonstrate their truly transformative nature and alignment with the decade, I think that's great, and there's a good chance that those will be endorsed. But we also might have new ideas and new kind of initiatives, and I think this is also a kind of a process that the decade offers in terms of trying to get the end users and the providers working together on those topics. The process of endorsement will only take place in the beginning of 2021, because we first also need to put in place the governance arrangements for the decade. There is, for example, foreseen a decade advisory board, which will then review the proposals that we will receive for this first call of action. What I want to say is, of course, this first call of action is not the only call that we are foreseeing. So, there is time, and of course we have 10 years, and we can advance incrementally in how we set our targets, but there will be calls issued on a biannual basis thereon from 2021. I think we could also think about how we design a specific call focusing on the issue of data. I think that's very important to try to trigger the good energy and willingness around the world, and particularly trying to find a process of alignment so that those institutional commitments can really contribute to achieving those big objectives. As Alison mentioned, we have a stakeholder forum that will be put in place at the beginning of 2021. And again, this can be the place for curating those communities of practice and on data issues, but also across the different groups. And as has been mentioned, linking with with the policymakers, with the private sector, with philanthropy. Those are also very important actors in the data arena. So we again invite you to join, to self-organize yourself. We are willing to help and provide the platform to do that, and the visibility as well, because some of those actions that will get endorsed as decade actions will then be also promoted at the international level through existing meetings. We have a Lisbon conference coming up next year. We have a Berlin first international conference of the decade, and thereafter we will have conferences on a biannual basis. So all those elements will really be useful, I think, for advancing the dialogue on some of the issues we discussed today, but also leading to concrete actions on the ground. So with this, Taco, I'll stop. And of course, the Secretariat is always available to answer questions. As mentioned, from the 15th of October, all this information will be available on the oceandecade.org website. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. The final item on the next steps, if Arno can show the slide again, please, is we have been talking about a a decade data conference in sometime next year. But you understand that it's still very uncertain what the situation with COVID-19, how that will develop. So should it be a preferably a face-to-face presentation conference? I mean, if not virtual, this offers perhaps an opportunity. We welcome all ideas and proposals for that. And it offers perhaps an opportunity to define such an action for your organization or for your country to help organize and host a decade conference sometime in 2021 or perhaps early 2022. These were the next steps that we have been discussing so far. And the common thing is that we invite you to join and to participate.